Welcome, Dynamite D, to the Refined Strength podcast. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on. And thank you by calling me for my actual first name instead of just Dynamite.
It's funny because, like, anytime I've ever, if you come up in a conversation and I say, like, oh, yeah, David DeMesquita, and they're like, who? Like, Dynamite D. Oh, yeah, I know him. We're friends. Like, are you if you don't know his name?
The funniest thing about it is every single tag is my actual name besides my Instagram tag, but my Instagram is so much bigger than any other platform that I have. And I was like, maybe people will catch on that my name's actually David. And yeah, people still haven't caught on. They're like, oh, hi, you're like Dynamite, right? When they see me in person, I'm like, hi, my name's David. Nice to meet you.
Where did the handle Dynamite D come from? Like,
So
what made you choose Dynamite?
Yeah, it's the only nickname I ever had. Well, actually, I got some nicknames later on. But when I was a kid, I was called Dynamite Dave, even though I never went by Dave. Please don't call me Dave. That was my grandfather's name. That's why I don't go by Dave, actually. So, but that was a nickname my uncle gave me. So that was the abbreviation was Dynamite D.
I mean, makes sense. It's memorable too. So I wanted to have you on the podcast because you've come up now in two podcasts of mine. One with Alex Edwards, your new figure and women's physique pro. Or did she get two pro cards or just figure?
She only got a figure pro card. She didn't compete in physique. When she was getting ready for that show, if it wasn't for the entrance fee, and I'm kind of upset about it, by the way, you guys, for all of you guys that are so confused, I don't compete anymore. $400 entrance fees, right? So we decided to only do figure, but when she was getting ready for the show on that Saturday before, I was like, you should really think about doing women's physique. She's like, yeah, the entrance fee is $400. And I was like, okay, well, we'll do figure.
Yeah. That it is hard. Like, so that's a good subject, I think, to talk about. Like, are your feelings about, obviously you support crossing over at a national show or regional. But a lot of people think that it's wrong to do and get a pro card in two divisions. So tell me your thoughts, rant about it a little bit.
Here's the thing is, I hope someone takes every single pro card from everyone else if they're that good, right? Like, why not? If they're that good. So I always had a physique that could kind of cross over, and I should have actually done open bodybuilding when I was at my biggest because I was 250 in my off season, and I was squeezing down to like 177 at first weight cap for classic physique, and now it's 194 pounds, the same height. So we were like stroking out trying to make weight cap, and I was destroying my physique every time to get into it. And I was someone that could have crossed over into men's physique, into classic physique, into open bodybuilding, because at the end of the day, when you're building a physique or bodybuilding, it's building the golden ratios is really what it comes down to. You should be able to win a pro card in every single category, or else your physique isn't completely developed enough to actually be a professional athlete. That's my honest opinion about it. Now, it's not to say in women's division is quite different. It's not like men's physique into classic into open. In women's, because you have certain categories that have X frames, and now you have like more of a pear shape, which is wellness. But then again, you have X frame sort of in figure, but having too big of legs isn't always a good thing in figure. And then you have an X frame again in women's physique. So there's quite big muscularity differences, but figure and physique kind of have the lines blurred sometimes where some of these figure competitors will eventually be better women's physique competitors. And that is a category I really would recommend to most people. If you're actually ready to go pro, if you cross over and you win your category, you're probably going to win both categories, and you may even win an overall in both categories if you're actually pro caliber. And yeah, I have no issues with it. It's kind of like these pros. You're going to like this one. It's kind of like these pros that compete at multiple shows, and everybody's like, oh, you're hogging the Olympia spots. No, they're trying to collect a paycheck, and good, because I don't want to see 90 athletes on the Olympia stage ever again. That was miserable.
Yeah, and like what also that makes happen at the Olympia, like it did the last year they did points, was like there were so many people backstage that they couldn't even pump up. So you were having people having issues with peaking and talk about those issues after the fact, that like it was a shit show backstage. because they couldn't actually hold a peak because of how long everything took.
Yeah, and I'll put that on the coach, not the athlete. But
Yeah.
it's definitely not easy because the communication is actually not easy because a coach can't go backstage unless you're like Hani Rambod, you're backstage.
Yeah.
That year, this is so fun. That year, it was so long that I watched some of the initial comparisons and I would go to the bathroom in between and still be halfway through their posing routines. Sometimes not even halfway through. And it took forever because I was VIP. So I'd had to go out through the crowd, all the way back in the bathroom, all the way back. And they were still on their posing routines. I was like, I actually just want to see first call outs right now and second call outs and see where guys line up right now. That's what I'm here for. So,
but it takes like over an hour to just get through the routines.
Yeah. It was rough. Athletes, it was rough on, and then fans, I don't think wanted to. I'm sorry, you guys that were Olympians that year, but I don't think fans wanted to see more than 20 to 30 people on that stage.
No, I agree, and I think like to be truly the best of the best, like there's a certain amount of pro shows, so there has to be at least that many competitors on the or on the Olympia stage, but there's not a lot of value in having like that many people when the judging is supposed to be like for truly the best in the world.
I hate to say it like this, but second place is the first loser, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the truth behind it. But that raises the standard across the board for all athletes to continue to get better. That's one reason why world records eventually get broken is because the standard keeps having it raised. We're watching when the Olympics are going on right now, right? Like, if you get beat in a race previously before you have to run again, you know that you have to run faster or else you auto lose. So it raises the bar. That's what that's at every sport. It's at every level. And you either rise to the occasion or you stop competing or you stop doing whatever sport it is.
Yeah, and don't complain about people competing at multiple shows when like that's literally someone's job. Like, yeah, we don't make money from competing alone as pros, but like if your goal is competing and you love competing because this is a hobby at the end of the day, then fucking compete and enjoy it. And like, if you win, then you're the best. Why would I want to win just because someone doesn't show up? It's so interesting to me when like, I see this a lot more with newer pros who like are friends with other pros and they're like, well, I don't want to do the show they're doing because of like, I don't want like them to win, or I don't want to win if they're gonna be there. Like they make it emotional and they think that they're gonna do well with that, when in reality it's like you're just making emotional decisions about where you're competing based on like someone else who has nothing to do with you, because chances are they want to win their show too, so they're not thinking about you doing that show.
There's strategy to competing on a pro level because especially in bikini, right? Because certain judges have a subconscious preference to a certain look, and I can understand that, right? Those are the judges that you should probably be in front of. There is a pretty solid standard across the board. If you're in front of an Olympian judge, they know what the criteria is, right? Like they're amazing judges. They just have subconscious preferences. Someone might favor a little bit harder condition look. Someone might favor a little bit more structural, softer look. But there's a level of fullness versus conditioning. So, but that's on the coach to also understand, like, if they know which judge is going to be at that show, that's how you have to bring them in. Now, when it comes to athletes versus athletes and coaches versus coaches, right? And this is kind of cool. I am friends with basically every single coach that's an Olympian coach in this sport. Like I'm a nerd, right? Like I want to beat their athlete at their best, and I want to see them sharing in a first call out. That's all that I want to see. Like I don't want to beat someone when they're not at their best. And you know what? My athletes don't want to beat someone when they're not at their best. Yes, they want an Olympia qualification, 100%. But I'll give an example. Ben Zimmerman.
They want to earn it. Fair and square.
You want to earn your spot, like that's like, I don't know. Participation trophies aren't my thing. So Ben Zimmerman was just 6th at the Tampa Pro. The previous year, he was 4th at the Texas Pro, which was a very deep lineup. The Texas Pro, it's one of the deepest lineup last year, and he only wants to do big shows. Tampa this year, we had 36 guys in it, and he was 6th place. Austin was actually 7th place, who was 3rd at the Chicago Pro the previous week. That's how deep it was, this lineup. And I had a particular look I want to bring to stage, and we brought that look. We were 100%. And guess what? Guy showed up 100%. That was a deep lineup. And he got 6th place instead of 4th place, but it was a better lineup against better athletes, in my opinion. Well, not taking anything away from the other athletes. Like Texas Pro is insane. However, there were phenomenal athletes, multiple Olympians on that stage. And we're going to do Texas this week. We're making some adjustments, and we're going in with a slightly different look because we know what the lineup looks like. It's deep. We're going to bank on a little bit size. So we're still bringing our best 100%, but we don't want to ever beat someone that's not at 100%. This is only his 2nd pro show ever, and he's already placing up there. You know, it's only a matter of time before you're an Olympian, but you don't want to be an Olympian and be dead last Olympian, right? Like that's, again, you want to go in with
even if you are the last Olympian. But at the end of the day, like if you have the type of goal, the intensity of the goal to make it to the Olympia, then you should be taking responsibility for what that really means at the level just below, at the pro level, which is, you know, the highest level, especially at these big shows. It's like you have no chance of being good at the Olympia if you're just scooting in and just like sneaking in there by this, you know, like skin of your teeth.
And it's my personal opinion, you want to be on stage with a top 5 or top 10 Olympian at some point in your pro season, but one, you're trying to qualify for the Olympia to see where you actually line up and where you need to make your improvements. If you don't actually know how you stack up against those people that are in the top running. So minimum, from a strategy standpoint, it's okay if you don't win. However, you know where you line up against this person. So how much size do you have to put on? Where are your areas of weakness? You probably know most of your areas of weakness, but how weak are those areas actually in comparison to someone else when you're on stage? Can you even hold your own in a pose, right? Some people, it's like, look, you have to completely change that pose. You just got smoked in that pose. And, you know, it's a humbling moment for sure. But if we're not humble and throw our egos to the side, we'll never make progress in any area of life. But you want to see yourself against the best at some point in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're never going to be your best if you're only focused on you versus you. I think you versus you is a really important thing to hold for yourself as an athlete, especially when you're all of a sudden like a new pro, a small fish in a big pond. You know that you will have to build yourself up and get there eventually and pay your dues. But it's like, it's only you versus you until you get on stage. And when you're on stage, like you have to be humble enough to like take the feedback. And I think that's a big problem that like a lot of people have, is that they kind of create a feedback loop that may or may not be rooted in reality when it comes to like what the judges actually see. What do you see in terms of like mistakes that competitors and coaches make when it comes to getting feedback from judges at the pro level?
This is hard. So usually judging feedback is pretty darn bang on accurate. I really like Tyler's feedback, for instance, right? Like if you ask him to lay into you, he will lay into you. And like if you ask about a weak point that you think is a weak point, he'll say yes or no. He'll be like, no, like that's actually fine, right? And that's actually good. You want to ask the judges. If you think a weak point is weak, straight up ask a judge that after you're in front of them and they can actually visibly see you, not just in pictures, because all y'all are like editing your pictures nowadays or adding structure to your pictures to make yourself look more conditioned.
And gym lighting is crazy right now too. Like the gym lighting in the bodybuilding gyms everywhere is so good.
Yeah, I have like all my bodybuilding photos from back in the day were like on an iPhone 6 face cam. Might as well been on like Windows DOS or something like that.
Those days.
So yeah, judges' feedback, right? So also I think what you said around the fact of painting your own image of that feedback loop is a very important statement. Understanding what the judge is actually saying versus what the reality of it is. So sometimes a judge says, hey, you need to come in more conditioned, right? And this person may be peeled, but they may be flat as a board on stage. But the judge knows what they see, and they don't see conditioning because there's no muscle pressing against the skin. So you don't look hard enough or full enough. So you can't even look conditioned because you're flat. That's a very common thing that I see. But the judge knows what they see. Or they may say, hey, you need to come in drier, right? And that's a statement of like maybe more conditioning, or it may be that you're so flat that you look wet on stage. That is a real thing. really commonly you'll see no abs of someone on stage. If you have no abs on stage, you're probably flat as a board.
And people are afraid of spilling over, and that's why typically you'll show up flat on stage, or the coach just is a little apprehensive on filling someone out, and so they'll just deplete them and figure like, all right, this will probably be good enough because they're just lean as fuck and they're dry. But like, if you're dry but not full, then doesn't matter. You're going to be flat and you're going to look soft on stage under the lights and with everybody else that's peaked perfectly.
And that's good for a pro card. It's not good for a pro win. That's the difference. Like if you're conditioned enough, you can get a pro card on any given day, right? It just depends on who shows up. However, on a pro stage, when you're competing as the best in the world, you have to take risks sometimes, like overspilling. I hate to say it like this, but if you overspill someone, you're not really paying attention. It's very difficult to overspill. So you can tolerate a lot of food. As long as the gastrointestinal system, your gut is actually in good shape, you can handle a lot of food. The other thing is, I see a lot of people going flat on stage. A lot. I used to call open bodybuilding the flattest bodybuilding division out there because they pull so much fluid that they literally had no fluid in their system and they were just flat. They couldn't even shovel nutrients. There was no amount of
great
insulin.
The next day.
But they look good as soon as they get a glass of water in their system immediately after the show. And that burger and fries, they think it's the burger and fries with the sodium. They probably have so much sodium and food in their system that it's like the water can finally like move that nutrient to like where it needs to go.
So why do you think that happens? Why do you think people are still pulling so much fluid especially in open bodybuilding?
This is the way, right? Like the Mandalorian saying like, this is the way. It's like so embedded and rooted in the system. And don't get me wrong, fluid manipulation, sodium manipulation, that stuff can come into play, but you have to have an eye for it. Like when you add fluid, if you're pulling fluid, like how much fluid? Like there is a point in time when you have to add fluid back in if you're pulling fluid. You're eventually just going to go flat if you just pull complete fluid out. Sodium, right? You can manipulate sodium and keep fluid in and you can get a drying effect that way. So the art of peaking is not always food. Usually it doesn't require much food to fill out, for instance, a bikini athlete, right? It's very rare unless you just see them like dropping like pounds overnight kind of thing. It's probably their fluid from stress dropping when they're finally eating and sleeping finally. However, when it comes to filling someone food, that's 100 pounds. It doesn't require a lot of food. It might be their best look. If they look good on a given day and they actually look hard and full, and that's a nice look to the skin texture in bikini with like a gallon of fluid in, well, they better have a gallon of fluid by the time they're on stage. It is what it is. Make them go to the bathroom more. I don't know. Yeah. You figure it out, but whatever that timetable is, you can find that off stage and literally don't change anything. Just let them step on stage at that time period of that day and just flip that day as that peak. And that's when you step on stage.
I find that especially with bikini competitors who don't need to be overly full or overly hard, like honestly, they don't need as much peaking as people think. And they're better off with just like a normal day of food and water and sodium and everything like that. And like sometimes that on a peaking plan given to you might look like, oh my God, there's so many variables. But if you really look at it, it's like, well, I'm really just repeating what we did that day you looked really good. Or like I'm repeating what we did last week for a refeed, and like your water intake and your morning routine and things like that.
Yeah. And the other thing that I also say about the art of peaking, I always talk about the art of peaking in the sense that you should have a perfect peak, right? Because a perfect peak should be no manipulation. Like you step on stage and like that's your best look. Actually, like get a workout in before you go on stage. You look awesome at the gym. Just do that. That's a perfect peak when you don't have to do anything. Perfect peaks don't always happen like that because you can't create perfect world scenarios, especially with stress and travel and stuff like that. However, the perfect peak is created by the perfect prep, which is how do you manage stress markers? How do you get someone to sleep when their metabolic rate's getting ramped up? Those are all the things. If you have low calories, are you giving them refeeds? Are they insulin resistant? If someone's insulin resistant, good luck feeding them. They're going to look really overspilled by the time they go to stage. So because they're not shuttling their glucose like they need to. So those are all the things that I say. People think of bodybuilding as a perfect peak, like you can make up during peak week. Yes, you can make up a lot during peak week and change your look a lot. If the person is healthy. If the person is not healthy going to peak week, sometimes you can't do much. And that's where bodybuilding, I completely changed my mindset around, is how you prep an athlete is how they will look on stage. If they feel sick in a prep, they're going to look sick on stage. If they feel completely worn down for 12 weeks, they're going to be worn down on stage. If you have them completely peeled at 8 weeks out, guess what? They're going to be stringy on stage in 8 weeks. And I think also people are so scared to miss on conditioning. They over condition their athletes and dig them into such a deep hole. And they're like, oh, don't worry. They're on PEDs. They can't waste muscle tissue. I guarantee you can't fill that muscle tissue out if you starve them down for 12 weeks straight.
Yeah. What would you say is like your favorite or go-to in terms of like mitigating stress and adrenal dysfunction and sleep issues when it comes to like getting in those last like 4 to 6 weeks before the show?
That's a good question, especially the time frame you just gave me, which is 4 weeks, because that's when like stuff really hits the fan really hard. So
yeah.
Okay. So usually you hit your first wall around like 8 weeks out if your prep's going pretty smooth. Then you hit another one every like 2 weeks or so, right? And then 2 weeks out, like you literally probably feel like you exist kind of thing if you're actually stage ready. So yes. At 4 weeks out, it gets a little bit interesting. So I really like microdosing of mushrooms, which is, I know, like more about becoming a hot topic. People are talking about kratom now. I think kratom is garbage, you guys. Everyone listening to me, like, you guys ask me about kratom. I literally hate kratom. Like, it is trash. It is also a trash bodybuilding drug, by the way. So just be
so popular, like wildly popular all of a sudden, and I really don't understand. I'm so glad.
I've experimented so much with nootropics because I'm ADHD and get severe anxiety and depression. So I need to figure out tools during my prep. And a lot of them I kept behind the scenes. Kratom was the number one that I would say has no place. And there's a very good reason, and it affects your hormones negatively. So that's one, throw it out. Two, God, a lot of people just lost money, I think. Two, microdosing mushrooms is awesome. Yes. I love microdosing mushrooms, and LSD is actually a unique one too. If someone goes too high on stimulants, right, you completely tax your adrenals. The lower stim you can go, the better off you are. So leaning into natural nootropics. This could be like L-tyrosine. This could be GABA before bed. This could be alpha GPC. Basically what's in pre-workouts without the stim works really well. Shoot, lion's mane. There are no stimulatory factors besides positive benefactors to your brain and your adrenals usually, and dopamine production, that it helps you function better in a day. So those are like some natural tools. Again, microdosing of mushrooms, depending on the strain, can help ground you, maybe even nap, or give you focus if you need to focus, right? Like if you're trying to wake up and you're getting a waking response and you take some mushrooms, it's probably going to help you wake up. If you're tired at the end of the day, hopefully you don't have a strain that wakes you up. Like Penis MD is one that actually like definitely gives you energy and is very strong. I don't recommend that before bed, but to help wind you down, rather than leaning into something like THC, which again has a place to an extent. If you're in a rare populace where it doesn't disrupt your sleep pattern, maybe. I mean, sleeping some is better than sleeping none, but there are great things to help you sleep at nighttime, even valerian root, chamomile tea. I don't really like melatonin. You should naturally produce melatonin before bed. I guess it could be a tool in prep, but there are better compounds out there.
It's easy to get accustomed to and like tolerant to, I think, with melatonin especially.
Right. And I find that most people have a negative impact from melatonin too.
Yeah. And they can't like actually stay asleep with it. But I agree. I think that's like a big misconception about THC that you mentioned, is like some people won't have a negative adaptation when it comes to sleep, and they won't have their sleep disrupted a lot. But like the people that do experience that, sometimes it's like the strain, and that like, well, oh yeah, no shit, you can't sleep, you just smoked a sativa. And or like you took way too much and you're trying to get high to get fucked up, instead of like having one hit on a vape or a 5 milligram or 2.5 milligram gummy that's more of a hybrid or an indica, and like that, because that's a wildly different result than straight sativa or getting high to get fucked up.
So the other thing that you're bringing up is habit forming, right? In bodybuilding, we have a terrible reputation for building up habits. Whether you have an addictive background, this is an extreme sport. Most people have some type of addictive personality and habit forming personality. We live on a structured basis. We're eating food every 2.5 to 3 hours. If we miss that meal, we feel terrible. We have natural habits that we form. If you're leaning into any compound, I'm going to actually throw SSRIs in here. I'm going to talk about benzos like Xanax, right? One, you can die from Xanax if you come off of them and you're taking too much. That should be a precursor enough to what's coming next. It is a terrible drug in the fact that it literally, it's such a short half-life. So when you're actually trying to take it, you constantly are having to take it again. And there's also something called serotonin syndrome, which creates a negative feedback loop in your whole system. And then you have a downregulation of dopamine, so your sense of urgency and drive. You want to talk about ED? Go ahead and take a bunch of Xanax, right? Like you're not going to produce dopamine. There's no drive there. You become a zombie.
Well, and then you're going to be searching and seeking dopamine, and like that can be negative as well and lead somewhere you don't want to go.
Yeah. So imagine traveling to a show. You've been taking this Xanax, right? Or you don't have the money to buy more Xanax, but you travel and you forget it at home, and that has been your aid for sleeping. You're probably going to freak out.
Yeah. And that cortisol is going to go crazy, and you're going to look like shit on stage.
Absolutely. Nothing ruins a prep.
No amount of food or water that can fix that.
So that's funny. I try to say that all the time. Like, look, the psychology of an athlete matters so much more than any perfect peak that you could ever try to create, because nothing can revert. You've got like 30 minutes sometimes to reverse out a cortisol response and the release of aldosterone, the uptake of water. Because I've seen athletes not pee for 12 hours before just because they're stressed. And then all of a sudden, like they walk off stage and they're just like sitting on the toilet peeing. They're not going to the bathroom other than that. And I'm like, wild. Like it is amazing what the body can do just from a high stress response.
Yeah. How would you say, like, in terms of, you mentioned like getting to know the athlete more on the psychological level, like, how has that developed over time for you as a coach in terms of getting to know your athletes and like figuring out what they need specifically, whether it's mushrooms or just a better talk before the show or whatever it is?
Yeah. So I'd say this is life. This is age. You have to go through a lot of hard stuff in life. If you don't go through a lot of hard stuff in life, you never become who you're supposed to be. You don't understand how to communicate or empathize with people. So having empathy for someone, this is one reason why I truly do believe, and I say this so frequently, this is why I truly do believe you've got to go through so many bad preps and finally a good prep before you know how to coach. That's it. Like you have, it is unique to itself. Every single prep has its own hardships. You probably have hardships in life. You probably have different financial hardships. You might feel lonely one prep. You might feel like you have a plethora of things before you go into prep, and then you have nothing afterwards because you ruined your life. And those are things that we see. So I truly do believe you have to go through enough experience in life to understand the psychology of a person in general and to help them through hardships and to talk them off a ledge. You've got to be standing on the ledge yourself multiple times. The other thing is going to be physically going through it yourself. The weirdest thing in prep for me was always having to go to the bathroom at nighttime, not having the energy to stand up to pee. So you sit down to pee and then you're like, oh, maybe I have to go poop, and nothing's coming out, right? Because you're hardly eating anything. And then you're like having talks with Jesus and God and stuff like that, right? Like you're having a religious experience sitting on a toilet. Like that is the weirdest thing ever. And it happens. Like most people have experienced that. Anyone that has gotten stage lean where like you're like, starvation mode, you start having senses of enlightenment, but you also have to delineate out what voices you should listen to and what voices you shouldn't, because you completely ruin your life if you choose the wrong ones.
But you might ruin your prep for sure.
I don't know. I think some wild stuff.
Yeah, you're like, we have so much that we can gain from our experience. And I think like I agree, the best coaches or the coaches that can change someone's life the most and relate to someone the most are the people that have been through a lot. And, whether it's bodybuilding, not bodybuilding, both, whatever, like I have had a lot of people that I know now that know me now that maybe I wasn't friends with a few years ago. They don't even know I've prepped for 6 pro shows and I've done 6 pro shows and none of them have gone well. but like I'll talk about like when you and I first connected, during my last prep in 2021. I met you for the first time in person at the Texas State where I competed, and I felt like shit. And I think I remember you saying something to me like, "You don't really look happy on stage. Like you look like something's wrong." I'm like, "This guy doesn't even know me, and he's saying that. Like that's saying something." And we had a conversation the next day, and you helped me peak for the next show. And even though like it wasn't like I was gonna magically win the show the next week because I did not have a good prep. So going back to what you said before, is like a bad prep is not really gonna peak well. I felt so much better, and I felt so much more confident, and that allowed me to not only have more fun on stage and like at that show, but look better too. And if it was only like a little bit better, but that mattered enough to make it worth it to do that. And that's true, because I know that you've had experiences like that yourself with your athletes as well, and like taking over someone's prep. That's a hard thing to do ethically, I think, for a lot of people. And I've had that experience myself as a coach, is like when someone really knows they're not with the right coach, and they know they need to be with you or someone else. They just don't know, like, is this the right time to do it? What should I do? I don't want to like let this person down, but I also don't want to ruin the rest of my prep. So I guess talk a little bit about that, about like clients switching coaches and like the drama and everything that can come around that.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, most coaches are kind of friends with other coaches. Mm-hmm. So don't badmouth another coach when you leave them. Most people don't actually anymore. Like I feel like it used to happen a lot. It doesn't happen as frequently anymore because maybe people have caught on. I mean, I posted about it a lot. Like most of us are friends with each other. I really personally don't take over anyone's prep mid-prep unless there's a very, very good reason behind it. I hardly even take on athletes anymore. It's very rare. So that's just my perspective. However, when it comes from an athlete wanting to switch, look, if something is going wrong earlier, sooner than later, and you're having conversations, open conversations with your coach, and things are progressively still getting worse or not being heard, and you're actually getting sick and stuff like that, you need to get healthy. Like, first off, you just need to be healthy. Like, that could mean pulling out of prep completely. If your life's falling apart, like, pull out of prep. Don't even find another coach. Like, pull out of prep. And, focus on life. Like, you need to reground yourself. If you're already semi-lean, you can always roll back into another prep. There's a million different shows that go on in a year. There's not a do or die moment. Most people, when they're prepping for most people that are prepping for shows anyways, it's like sometimes you just need more time. It's not a deeper caloric deficit. It's just more time. You're already in a massive caloric deficit, most of these people. So asking yourself the hard questions where, okay, what is going on? What feedback does my coach need right now? And am I giving my coach all the feedback that he needs to know? This sometimes, and not every coach wants to know this, I ask this question, I want to know life stressors that are going on. If you're having hardships in your life, there's only so much you can do sometimes to combat stress. If it's relationship stress, I mean, if you're telling me, right, like I'll offer my peace of mind, and like from my lens of view, which is a different lens of life than you have, maybe it helps you to have that another eye on it. If your body keeps fighting because you have life stresses going on and you're not telling your coach, that's the first thing you need to do. So is tell your coach, like, hey, like there's some stuff going on personally. I don't think I can prep because my body's literally fighting me right now. And I'm giving this everything that I have. And I feel like I'm just grinding into the ground. That's one. When you're looking for another coach, make sure that I don't want to say a background check because there's no such thing as a background check. Make sure that you've heard them in conversation of some sort. Don't look at transformations online. Transformations are usually people that go from like if you're talking about a male, TRT to enhanced and on stage. And then if you're talking about women, it could be natural and on nothing to on Anavar and on stage, right? Like it's something as simple as that makes a massive difference in the physical appearance. Like, were they healthy when they're, were they somewhat healthy? Or did they have a good time? Did they enjoy their prep? I think the question is, did they enjoy their prep? Yeah. And
And
That's
are they
what should be.
better than they were when they started? Because a lot of people start a prep thinking that the prep will fix them and the prep will make me happy and the prep will, like, change my life. But like, yeah, it'll change your life. But if you're not intentional about the how, then it's not going to change your life for the better. You're just going to dig yourself deeper and you're not going to be able to handle how bad your life gets at the end of prep when you're depleted and deprived and stressed and you pushed everybody out around you. Like, your life is not going to get better unless you intentionally work on making it better during the prep and beforehand.
I love that you actually just said that. So one thing that I always say is never forget your why. What was your reason why you started on a journey? The Some people relate to their why as something negative, right? So for instance, like a breakup. But what actually caused that breakup? So like you're still in trauma if you say a breakup. But if you're like, look, like I wasn't good enough for this person, and this is the reason why they left me was because of X, Y, and Z. So this is my understanding. I'm going to better myself. So I'm doing this for myself. That's your why, not I got broken up with. That might have been the thing that the nail in the coffin. But did you actually take the time to actually look back at what you could have done better yourself? It doesn't mean that you need to stay with that person. When people split up, they split up for a very good reason. However, what were the things or the traits that weren't right for each other or that you need to fix in yourself? Because the deeper the journey within you go, the more you can impact people externally. So, and people always look to external environments, becoming victim mindsets. Look inward first. Like what's actually going on?
What could you do to improve instead of searching for that improvement in something or someone else? And that's a big thing, especially with people that are kind of serially in relationships after relationship, or like going from one person to another and always seeking. It's that what you're seeking is not going to be found in other people. It's not going to be found in a prep, and it may not be found in the coach that is flashy and says that they'll turn you pro. It's found within yourself. You could turn pro with any coach. Like, if you have the genetics and you have the work ethic and all the things, like, any coach could do that for you. But you have to find it within yourself to create the physique and the physique is only created out of your mindset and your work ethic and how long and how patient you are with it.
You said something that really grinds my gears. When coaches take credit for the athlete's work, it bothers me so much. If you're a top 5 Olympian, you've got the genetics in you from day one. You got the work ethic embedded in you since very early age, right? Nurture and nature. So if you are a great athlete, it's only a matter of time. Actually, Paul told me this one. I love this saying. You're one day away from greatness. And that's a great saying to live life by, because you never know when your day is going to be. Just keep showing up and keep showing up better daily. Not every day is going to be an easy day. Most days are actually going to be hard days, but you can turn a hard day into a learning day, and then it's a good day. So that's the way that that's the way I've always lived my life, is like, just keep showing up. Everyone was like, oh yeah, I would be a successful coach if I had X amount of following. It's like, you understand, I was posting 3 times a day for almost a decade. I was coaching for about 7 years before like people actually knew really who I was. Doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes, still do every now and then, but I kind of pulled back on all that. It's one of those things that's like super near and dear to me, is like, you're responsible for your success. There's no magical coach that's going to do it. When you find the coach that you vibe with and that you're bound to, stick with them. And there's the grass isn't usually greener on the other side. If you guys are speaking the same language and you guys are growing together, if that coach is also growing and you're growing, grow together. And that's the reason why most of my athletes I've been with for like 2 to 3 years a piece, maybe longer, some of them.
Yeah. And I find that people that do like leave a coach, whether it's me, a friend, colleague, whatever, like people who leave a coach before they, like, if they maybe didn't need to, it's almost never because like the coach is actually a bad coach. It's honestly usually because there's some lack of communication. And so that means there's a lack of trust or something. And so like I always tell people, and I've gotten a lot more adamant about this with my clients as I've just grown as a coach and as a person, of like, asking for feedback and asking for honesty, because if I can get that from them, then that makes me a better coach. And I think that's a good lesson for a lot of coaches that some people are scared of asking for, is the constructive criticism, even if it feels negative, or if you're afraid of offending me. Like, I want to know that stuff, because if I know what I'm missing, I can become a better coach. So then you don't have to feel like you have to start over with another coach when you're not making progress, or when you are doubting yourself and your ability to reach your goals. Because you shouldn't doubt yourself and your coach. Your coach should be able to like empower you and instill the trust in them to get the job done.
I completely resonate with that one. So I think it's also important. It's not just for your current clients to do this with. If you're a coach out there, if someone leaves you, ask them why. You know, like truly ask them why. Just be like, look, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, I'm just curious to like why you're leaving. Like, what could I have done? You don't ask them why you're leaving. Say, what could I have done better to serve you, to make you stay on with me? I'm just curious for future, because I want to become better. It has nothing to do with them leaving you. They made the decision. They're gone. So that's something that I think everyone should be willing to do. It doesn't mean that you have to give a response back. Just take the information and be like, okay, cool. Like, I could understand that. And usually they have, you could honestly, if you just take a step back and remove your emotions and look through their lens for the situation that happened, they're going to be right, because that's how they feel for a very good reason.
Yeah. And they're the athlete. They're the one that's paying you for the service and that is trusting you with their body. And like, yeah, I think sometimes people are a little like quick to jump, especially if they haven't communicated what they need first. And that's just sometimes like a maturity thing that they're like, that they have to learn over time, or maybe they'll never learn. But yeah, if you can just communicate and like understand that like your coach is a person too, and they want to get better, just like you want to get better as an athlete, then like, just imagine the possibilities if you have like this relationship already that you can continue improving. Because it's similar to like a marriage or like a long-term romantic partnership, is like, you're always going to want to improve and show up better and better, especially as you both change as people, because that happens. We're not just the same people we were when we met our significant other. We're always evolving.
It's actually interesting that you're talking about this. So I just want to flip it back to high-level athletes really fast and talk about communication. With most of my high-level athletes, it's a mutual agreement on almost everything, right? Like I'm still the person that's helping. This is what coaching is.
Steering.
I help put the foot on the gas pedal and the brake pedal if needed. That's simply it. The person has their hand on the steering wheel. You just make sure that they don't go out of the lines or into a ditch, more so into a ditch. And that's called health, by the way, you guys. But you're going in the right direction. The athlete's going to get there. You're just assisting them. You're literally like cruise control with like maybe Tesla's auto drive. That's hopefully what it is. It's that smooth, you know? Make sure you don't hit a car in front of you. So that's what coaching is. It can be with these high-level athletes in agreement of like, hey, like I want to bring this look in peak weeks. There are always pivot points that you can make. If I'm like, hey, I want to bring you in fuller, you're not going to be as dry, but I think it's the best look. Do you agree with this? Because if I know this athlete wants a say in it, I will let them have a say in it. I will say, this is my bet, right? For instance, Ben last week, I was like, I'm going to bring you in dry, hard, and conditioned. You're going to be the most peeled, dry one on stage. In my opinion, he was. And I'm pretty sure most people would agree with that. So now he was 13 pounds under stage weight, right? What do I know? We're 13 pounds under stage weight and we straight up got beat on muscle tissue. That's it. And Justin was amazing. He has amazing structure, some of that structure in Classic Z. So what was my saying? Well, we're going against almost the same exact pack again. Let's come in bigger. We're going to come in fuller, slightly less dry, but fuller, and we're going to see how we do. We're going to be more muscular on stage. And that's a look that we agreed upon, so we're going to make sure to mold that look onto stage. And I think that that's a very important thing to instill and to communicate and to build trust with someone, because then they're not stressing out. They're like, oh, like, I don't look big anymore. I don't look dry, or I don't look full. Like, they should be able to communicate that with the coach. And if the coach has a reasoning for it, just give them the reasoning of like why you're doing that with them. It helps athletes out. Now, newer athletes, they're going to have a hard time doing that. So I'm talking like super high tier athletes, like Olympians and stuff like that. it definitely helps to have that conversation. And in fact, Gina, when she came over to me, she asked if I do collaborations, like collaborative efforts. And my answer was 100%. I actually enjoy it. I like working with great athletes, and I like athletes that actually understand their body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big thing that like I've always really respected about you is that like you're a very collaborative person, and like you said, like you're friends with a lot of coaches. Like that's how it should be. And you're friends with your athletes, and like a big part of like building trust with athletes, high level or not, is like allowing them to understand your thought process. And like if you're a new athlete listening to this, like the way that you become a high level athlete is by understanding what your coach is doing more, so that you have more trust, more buy-in, and you can do a better job of it. Because if you understand something, you're going to do better at it. You're just going to understand it and like be more skilled, instead of just like blindly following the process. Like, I'll eat dirt if you say to eat dirt. I don't care why you want me to do it. Because like, yeah, that can elicit a result, but it kind of stops you in your tracks in terms of being able to progress past that point. And like, it doesn't allow you to open your mind much in terms of like, just what type of a better athlete could I be? How good can I be? I don't know until I really ask. And I really like find out, well, what do you mean by spilled over? What do you mean by like showing a conditioned instead of big? I want to learn, because if you want to learn, you're going to become more self-aware, and you're going to be able to predict more about like what your coach wants and what they're talking about.
So I love that we're going down this little bit of a rabbit hole, because I'm going to keep running with it right now. So this is the thing about coaching. This is the thing about life. If you're a business owner, for instance, if you have employees or you're coaching athletes, it is an insecurity if you're not giving them knowledge and you're not building that person up. If you're tearing that person down so that they can't grow, you're suppressing their ability to ever become great at whatever they're doing. You should want to build someone up to become better, to become a leader. That's what you should be doing. Make people's lives better. Life's so simple. If you can make one person's life better before you leave this planet, you've done the world a service and you made the world a better place before you left it, because you never know when your day is going to be last. So that's literally the saying I live my life by. Like, just make the world a better place before you leave it. It's not rocket science, and make lives better.
It's not that hard.
So, like, you should want to build people up. Exactly.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's just like, there's so many more opportunities that can come from that too. It's like, if I make this experience, a prep, better for you than it could have been, or than that you expected it to be, then I've done a great job, win or lose. You know, obviously we want to win, but if you felt really good throughout the whole thing, and you feel really good about your future prospect and your potential, then you're much more likely to not only stay with me as a client, or stay with you as a client, but like you're much more likely to just grow into a better client and a better person.
There's only one person that's going to win on that stage, or in any scenario, actually. So the best thing that you can do is go in with no expectations and learn, because that's a win. And the best losers are also the best winners at the end of the day. So they will outpace the people that are sore losers every single day. Like, give me the hardest work ever.
Yeah, because it's like, it's one thing to be competitive just in general, but a lot of people confuse competitiveness with like wanting to get somewhere by a certain time, and so they're impatient, and so that's why they might cut corners, or they don't take as long of an off season, or they kind of they jump around from thing to thing, and they don't really spend the time to see like, what could my trajectory look like if I took more time, and if I slowed down a little bit, and if I enjoyed my life a little bit more, and got to know my coach more, or got to know my client more. Like, so much more can happen when you just kind of slow down and really live in the moment.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've had to really do this year. I had some pretty scary experiences this year, and lucky to be standing here right now. So I had to actually put my foot on the brake. The first time in over a decade, probably close to 16 years, where I had to actually stop living in survival mode and grind mode, and put my foot hard on the brake and literally just survive for like an entire week. And I had to do it twice this year. And you realize that the things that I actually preach are actually the things that all that matter, because the people that you're surrounded by, those are the people that are going to miss you the most. So really embracing a beautiful day outside, looking up at the sky, the little things. If you can't do that on a given day and you actually appreciate what you built over the last, you're 30 years old, 30 years, right? Like you've been working hard for 30 years to get to wherever you are today and learn. It's the journey that you go on. In bodybuilding, or as a coach, we're here to get them from point A to point Z, Z being their goal, right? We obviously want to get them past Z, but point A to point Z. If this athlete is not healthy and pacing properly, then, and you're trying to go from point A to point Z as quickly as possible, it's like running a marathon in a sprint format. If you're sprinting a marathon, you gas out and you never reach point Z. You never become an Olympian because you're sick and you're out of the race. You're done. You're gassed. You're going to get passed up by everyone else. And you're probably going to walk away with a miserable experience because you're crawling on the ground right now. And by the way, you may actually continue to stay crawling on the ground for the rest of your life. And that's what actually people don't understand, is that there are long-term ramifications for going too fast through any aspect of life. It takes fundamentals to build upon, to make sure that a structural building does not fall down. It's not like you can put it on soft ground and then guess what happens? Yeah, you put that on literally dirt. Well, the building's collapsing in slowly but surely now because you didn't make a cement slab big enough to support that building.
Yeah, it's your body. It's not a building too. Like, that's a great analogy, but people don't really even like take it further to realize like, wow, I'm doing this to my body. Like, it's the only one I have. Why am I not taking better care of it? You know, like I something I tell some clients sometimes is when like I can sense they are taking things a little too seriously or like stressing out a little bit too much. It's like, hey, it's just bodybuilding. It's like, bodybuilding is stupid. Like, it's cool. It's a sport that we love to do. And it is my entire livelihood, right? But it is just a sport. It is just a hobby. And it is not worth, like, a plastic trophy or a placing or a status is not worth your health. And there's, yes, it's not a healthy sport in it up, like, inherently, but there are healthier ways to do it. And most of the time that means like slower, more patient ways to do it, and just being like a little bit more, being more self-aware of like where you're at currently and what you're up against. And that like pushing hard also means pulling back sometimes.
Yeah, the analogy I always use is actually a race car, right? Because we're trying to perform as fast as we can and to win that race. However, if you don't ever pull in for a pit stop, your tires are eventually going to blow out or you're going to go into the sidewall.
Mm-hmm.
If you step on the gas pedal too hard for too long, that engine blows out, and that engine is your heart. So there are major implications for not going in for that pit stop and to really step on the gas pedal and then put your foot on the brake. It's okay. Like you need to pace properly. And that's really, we're not racehorses. Racehorses have short lifespans. They run it and then they probably give them a bunch of painkillers to make sure that they can run the next race. And eventually they don't have a leg that they can walk on anymore.
Yeah. And no, it's a great analogy. Outside, I don't know if this is kind of like what you just talked about is the answer to this question, but if it's not, what would you say is the most important lesson that you've learned as a coach or an athlete?
The most important lesson that I've learned as a coach or athlete is enjoy the experience, because the experiences matter more than anything else in this world. So whether it's with loved ones or whether it's getting on stage, make friends backstage and go have a fun time on stage. The people that are usually having fun on stage are usually in the first call out, and they're usually having a good time with each other on stage.
Because they're calm and they're not worried.
Yeah, it's not that serious. Life needs to be fun. There's a lot of serious aspects of life. So when you're doing something that you enjoy, embrace the experience, whether it's good or bad. If it's bad, learn from it. Make it a good experience. Make it a learning experience. But if you just view it in an optimistic way, you're probably going to have a great experience. And then you're going to be able to talk about it later with your friends or whoever. So embrace the journey, not the end goal. Don't hyperfixate on the end goal, because life is very fluid. and you should be able to ebb and flow as needed, because there are going to be rocks, pebbles, and boulders that you hit along the way. Make sure that you keep flowing down that river.
Yeah, I love it. What would you say is like the thing that has taught you that the most? Or like what aspect of your life as a coach and an athlete, husband, father, like what has taught you that lesson as being the most important?
Actually, you asked me as a father, so I'm going to answer the first time as a father on a podcast, because I've never answered that.
Because your baby is how old? Like a few months?
She actually, today she's 4 months old.
Wow, that's crazy.
So she's a little peanut. She's growing fast though. So I'd say seeing my child as a completely blank slate, and that it's really the little things that matter. Energy matters so much. So my child literally can't see, can only feel, hear, smell. Like it's basically like Daredevil, like blind, right? Like the child blind essentially. And not only, this is super, super cool thing for me to experience. You know when the child needs the mother, and you know when the child needs the father. It's a very prominent vibe that gets given off. The other thing, if you are stressed, the baby feels that. If you're scared, the baby feels that. So making sure, if you're just giggling and smiling and laughing, even if the baby's crying in front of your face, that's usually a sign of communication, but sometimes they're just crying, right? And it is what it is. And if you just stand there, and I call it the happy dance, right? Like if we just start doing the happy dance and we're like, happy dance, and like we just like bop around and I smile at her, she usually starts cheering up and smiling and start giggling. And life is literally that simple, where live in the moment and focus on the positive energy, give out positive energy to the point where like negative energy doesn't even come into your life. You don't even know what that is. And that's actually the point. I'm very bliss in my life. I'm very ebb and flow. I do go through life at a very fast pace, and I'm serious about a lot of things, but I'm very chill in every aspect at the same time. So I have to be very fluid because of how rigid my brain is. And seeing the child develop from a blank slate, and the unique one for me was, this is 3 weeks old, when I knew that she knew she was looking at me, and she probably couldn't see me. I was probably like a shadow or something like that, but I smiled at her and she smiled back. And I was like, dang. I was like, that's the first time I ever saw her like truly smile, like understand. I was like, wow, this little thing can actually understand what's going on right now. Like it's all energy and vibes. And that's the big thing for me, is like live in the moment, give out positive vibes, receive positive vibes, and don't focus on the negative, because if that's all that you consume yourself with, the energy you put out is the energy you receive. And you can also push away bad energy too.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think that's been a big lesson for me in the past, just like few years, ever since like, I think we like go through series or periods of purging in life. And like, you know, I got divorced in 2020, and then I like moved across the country, and like lots of different huge changes in my life have taught me the same thing. And like, especially as a coach, like just thinking about like energy, like the energy that you're giving people is going to affect their lives and their health. And so like, to me, if I ever feel like I'm having a bad day, especially now, like I'm in prep, I haven't been in prep for a while. So it's like, you know, a few weeks ago, I was just like having a shitty day, and I was like really not into it at all, into anything. And I open up like my check-ins for the day, and like one after another was just like positive thing after positive thing, like just really great things to say about whether it was their journey or me or whatever. And I'm like, how can I possibly be sad or mad or annoyed? Like, this is my life. And so just like being able to, when you don't maybe have that reminder staring you in the face and smiling at you, like it's still there in some way. You just have to find it, and you have to seek that positive energy versus just like sitting and stewing in the negative, because, you know, for whatever reason, people like to do that. I don't know. But I think it feels comfortable and safe sometimes to sit in that negative. And there's almost like a sense of guilt when something negative is going on, and you're not just like focusing on like that negative thing and trying to solve it or trying to, get over it in some way.
Yeah, it's actually funny. What for some reason you triggered me to think back to when I left corporate America. I remember I used to always like if I wasn't up at 8 o'clock on the dot and having my messages open, like I was going to get in trouble, right? I remember one time I woke up at like 8:15, and this is right after I left corporate America. It was either day one or day two. Woke up at 8:15. I was like, I literally started like put my hands down, was like ready to jump out of bed and log in. I was like, wait,
oh shit,
like I don't work with anyone anymore. Like I'm solo dolo now. And I laid back down, went to sleep because I was exhausted. Went to sleep and woke up about an hour later. And the first thing I did was I was like, hey, Caroline, you want to go outside and go for a walk? And walked and looked up at the sky. And I was like, took a deep breath. And I was like, like life's not that serious. I was like, you just have to like realize that like you are free at all times to an extent. You just have to find your peace at that moment in time. And everyone just so caught up in a day in the life and the grind and the hustle where they don't live bliss. And monks are pretty phenomenal at living bliss lives, but they find peace, and that's what their journey is trying to find enlightenment.
Yeah. Well, I think you're giving really great examples of like how you are an example of that in terms of like, you can be a high functioning elite level coach. You coach fucking Olympians, and you can still live in the moment and go for a walk and do a happy dance with daughter and enjoy life in the moment. And a lot of people think that that's impossible, that like, I can't possibly be both. I have to be one or the other, like the high or the low. And that if I'm the low, I'm going to be left behind and nothing's going to happen for me. And if I'm the high, like I don't get to enjoy life because hustling is my life. And that's just not true.
I'm just going to say, don't take on too many clients. Like build relationships with your clients and make it fun. Like, because then your actual job is enjoyable. On top of it, you can actually do a happy dance. You can go outside and see the sunlight every once in a while. Like money isn't that serious. If you have like a roof over your head and food in your stomach, you're doing pretty good for yourself. Like you're fine.
Yeah. Well, and if you're doing a good job at what you're doing, if like just putting it as like for coaches, if you're doing a good job at a level that's manageable to you, your life and your work will align if you just keep focusing on doing a good job. And that alignment will come in like opportunities that you would have never expected. Sometimes you have to create them. Sometimes they just come along. And, maybe that's getting to a point where like, well, I'm getting so many inquiries, I'm going to raise my prices. Well, then I'm going to make more money because I have, higher paying clients, and they're better clients. They're better quality clients who are working harder and who are better, more coachable. And so things just start compounding when you fully focus on just like doing your best every day, but not taking on too much.
Absolutely. I know that people have a really hard time saying no to money. I know people have a hard time, but it is definitely worth it because there's a point in time I was working from, and I still almost do this. I was working from usually 6 to 7 a.m. in the morning till midnight to 2 a.m. And I'd rinse and repeat that. And I took a step back and I asked Caroline, actually, because she was just notating down how many clients I had and stuff like that, because I didn't have like the systems in place like I do now. And I was like, how many clients do I have right now? And it was way higher than the number that I ever wanted. Like I have a hard number that I do not go over. And I am hard on that number. Like it reduces down over time, not increases over time. I was miserable. I didn't enjoy. I love coaching. I'm passionate about it, but it was taking away my joy from coaching. I have to be honest. Like it was to the point where like I was like, yeah, I'm about to retire at this rate, and I'm going to go back to IT or something like that. So, but I reeled it back in and like put it back down to my number that I wanted, and I just left it there, and I never took it above that number again because there's no amount of money in the world that is worth your happiness. I can promise you that. There are plenty of wealthy people I know, and I'm surrounded by so much money and some people are not happy. A lot of people are not happy. Like the happiest people are the ones that live the most simple lives. And it doesn't like this, even the ones that are very wealthy that are in my very close circle, they genuinely love life and they're so simple with how they live their lives. You would never know.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I'm out of water and I'm thirsty and I'm hungry. Yeah. So I am so grateful for you and all of your wisdom and everything on the podcast. So I'm super happy to have you on and excited to put it out there. Thank you for just like everything you do as a coach and just like in the industry being that like ripple effect for other people, because it's an important part of like how our industry grows.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on here as a guest. And, if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. And that goes for anyone listening too. Feel free to reach out. I try to respond to literally every single person to the best of my ability.
Yeah. And I will put all your info in the show notes. I don't know if you're taking on clients, but David is an amazing coach who would happily, I'm sure, change someone's life again. So, all right. Thanks, man.
I appreciate this.